So the theme that has been given to me to present is at the heart of friendship. And particularly, I want to focus on the role of friendship in our spiritual growth, keeping in mind the Montfortian spirituality. Okay, as a premise, I should say that friendship is a gospel-like call. And anticipate that it's really something not just optional, especially for consecrated people. It is somehow an imperative, something very important if we want to grow in holiness. After all, Jesus Christ himself said, "You are my friends if you do what I command you. This I command you, love one another." And he said it in the context of the farewell discourse during that preceded somehow Passover. The friendship that Jesus has with his disciples, it is what he recommends his disciples to have among themselves. So our basic conviction is this: we are convinced that the development of our character in Christian virtue and the transformation of ourselves in holiness are impossible apart from relationships with people who share our Christian aspirations and who love us enough. I don't know why here the text is covered. How do I take away this bar? Never mind. Who love us enough. At the start of what is the ground, the platform of this call to friendship, especially among consecrated people? It all started at the Incarnation. Saint Marie de Montfort says in Love of the Eternal Wisdom, numbers 64 through 66, the bond of friendship between eternal wisdom and human beings is so close as to be beyond our understanding. Wisdom is for man, and man is for wisdom. He is an infinite treasure for man, and not for angels or any other creatures. Wisdom's friendship for man arises from man's place in creation, from his being an abridgment of eternal wisdom's marvels, his small yet ever so great word, his living image and representative on earth. Since wisdom, out of an excess of love, gave himself up to that to save men, he loves man as a brother, a friend, a disciple, a pupil, the prize of his own blood and co-heir of his kingdom. For men to withhold his heart from wisdom or to wrench it away from him would constitute an outrage. This eternal beauty, ever supremely loving, is so intent on winning man's friendship that for this very purpose he has written a book in which he describes his own excellence and his desire for man's friendship. This book reads like a letter written by a lover to win the affections of his loved one. For in it he expresses such ardent desires for the heart of men, such tender longings for men's friendship, such loving invitations and promises, that you would say he could not possibly be the sovereign Lord of heaven and earth, and at the same time not being happy without the friendship with man. In his pursuit of man, he hastens along the highways, or scales the loftiest mountain peaks, or waits at the city gates, or goes into the public squares and among the gatherings of people, proclaiming at the top of his voice, "You children of men, it is you I have been calling so persistently. It is you I am addressing. It is you I desire and seek. It is you I am claiming. Listen, draw close to me, for I want to make you happy." I must say that some years ago, I was honored to hear the confidence of some daughters of wisdom, of course now grown in age, but when they related about the starting point or the motivating words for affirming them or confirming them in their vocation, they quoted the same passages I have just read. Said, "I was so taken up by the words of Montfort concerning wisdom and the friendship of wisdom towards humankind that I found myself just giving into this love." And that was the final point that convinced me that I should enter religious life. So this passage suffices to manifest one of the priorities of Montfort's mission, which was and is to help people embrace a new image of God, namely that of God as a tender friend. You know that one of the main problems among people is to re-educate themselves or do some mental hygiene as regards the. And Montfort did that very, very well. He presented not a judging God, but God as a tender friend. In Canticle 52:11, he sings, "God alone is my tenderness. God alone my support. God alone is all I have, my life and my wealth." It follows that if our ministry draws inspiration from the mystery of the Incarnation, it must be lived in a spirit of friendship and must generate in our communities an atmosphere of friendship. And that's why Christ emphasizes this point in relationship with his disciples. Our friendship with Jesus, incarnate wisdom, reminds us that God puts a comma where we thought only a full stop was possible. These are the words that I have taken lately from a book written by Cardinal José Tolentino de Mendoza, who is now the prefect for the Congregation of Education in the Vatican. And Jesus wanted his disciples to know what friendship is all about. And he wanted somehow to test them along this line. So to understand the above statement better, the one of Mendoza, let us focus on the dialogue between Jesus and Peter by the Sea of Galilee. Jesus could have asked Peter so many different questions when he appeared to him after the resurrection. He could have asked, do you remember all I have said to you during the 3 years we spent together? Do you remember all the miracles I have done? Can you explain to me why you disown me? Are you ready to take charge of the church I have entrusted to you? So forth. You could have asked such questions. The three questions that Jesus asked Peter have nothing to do with remembering past events, pointing fingers at mistakes, or evaluating skills or whatsoever. Rather, the questions of Jesus have to do with a concern about saving his friendship with Peter. Do you love me by putting all your love for me on the line? Can you tie your life to me? Do you love me as a friend? Jesus really wanted to save his friendship with Peter. And I believe because friendship is the secret for success in apostolic life. In Jesus' questions, John uses two Greek words, phileo, which indicates love in the dimension of friendship. I like you, better translated as such. And agapao, which indicates love in its most oblative dimension, as a total gift of self. I love you. And Jesus conjugates with Peter the verbs of both friendly love and oblative love. The first question, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Agapas me? Jesus uses the verb of agape, of love in its highest dimension. Peter responds with a verb that limits his love to the level of friendship. Phileo, philosse, I like you. That is, you are my friend. Second question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Agapas me, again, but without the comparison, more than this. Jesus lowers his expectations. Peter's answer reiterates his sentiments of friendship. Philosse, Lord, you know that I like you. The third question, Jesus further lowers his expectations and asks, Simon, son of John, are you my friend? Phileis me, do you like me? If love is too much for you, can you give me some affection? If love frightens you, can you give me your friendship? Jesus sympathizes with Peter. He lowers his demands of love. What he asks of him is not perfection, but authenticity. One of the most beautiful experiences we have in life is friendship. And Jesus knows that very well. Indeed, from my personal experience as religious and priest, I have learned to convince myself that the secret of a humble, joyful, and generous religious and priestly life is friendship with Christ and with soulmates. May I read just a testimony of a priest who crossed the threshold of 100 years. He's actually from my same diocese, the Diocese of Bergamo. His ministerial life did not experience any particular career advancements, but he lived a life of loving submission to God's will. He was asked to indicate the secret code of his priestly life, and he presented his rule of life as follows. Every day, I have tried to remain faithful to my Eucharistic adoration and meditation, carefully choosing the most suitable times and the most inspiring authors for my readings. I assiduously attended the practice of confession, knowing fully well that to be a good confessor, one is to be a humble penitent. I have never neglected my Marian devotion. I have always entrusted myself to Providence, being satisfied with the essentials. I have committed myself to safeguarding the virtue of chastity with a sense of maturity, joy, and dedication, discovering how true it is that life is abundantly received precisely when it is generously offered. I have learned to obey without being either fearful or courtier, recognizing that God's will always passes through human mediators. But now here is the line that I like most. I have tried to cultivate friendships in the spirit of authentic fellowship. And he concludes his testimony saying, I will die happy. To ensure that we are able to foster authentic fellowship and friendship, we need to ensure that in our life we implement not compulsive control, but life-giving relationships. People who focus too much on control, obviously controlling their emotions, controlling particularly people they live with. Such people cannot make good friends, cannot entertain friendships. And that's very pitiful. So one thing we need to check on ourselves is this problem of control. It's very common among people in leadership, including church people. Power is said to cause a blinding effect. Typically, this is the case of King Herod, of Joseph's brothers, of Pharaoh, King Ahab, Peter, who wanted to control the agenda of Jesus, Pilate, and so forth. I don't read a particular text in this regard. If you are interested in my whole presentation, I can send it over, forward it to you later on. But this just to give example that these people could not be friends, could not make friends, because there were people focused on controlling people, not on making or creating, establishing life-giving relationships among them. And also the Sanhedrin, obviously. Control can be imposed in the name of good family traditions to the detriment of the Holy Spirit's work. Well, remember the experience of Montfort in relationship with his father, Jean-Baptiste Grignon. His father would have liked to direct Louis towards the profession of lawyer to guarantee him a certain economic stability, and obviously to keep the Grignon family in prestigious positions. Louis sensed the pressure of that control on him and felt very uncomfortable in his father's presence. Certainly, Jean-Baptiste Grignon never established a friendly relationship with his son. Montfortians Okay, first of all, let me say control can also be imposed to safeguard conformism against originality. Montfortians often like to recall and reflect on a poignant meeting between Montfort and his best friend, Jean-Baptiste Blain. Montfort was looking for followers and thought first of his best friend. When in their dialogue they got to the heart of the matter, Jean-Baptiste raised many doubts about the authenticity of Montfort's lifestyle and tried to control his apostolic extravagance with very harsh and provocative words. A biographer of Montfort quotes Blain's words as follows: "Where in the gospel do you find any evidence or examples to support your strange and extraordinary practices? Why don't you give them up? Or at least, why don't you ask God to give you the grace to let go of them? All the rejections, contradictions, and persecutions you feel come upon you precisely because your strange and singular behavior attracts them. You will achieve much better results, find much more helpers, and much more assistance in your work if you could outdo yourself by putting aside these false heroics that only give free thinkers and worldly people the weapons they need to attack you and hurt your life and ministry." When we are too much in control, I need to ask myself, what am I afraid of losing? Most of us are a little more sophisticated in our controlling behavior, perhaps even unaware. But we all control at some point. And when I am too much in control, I have to ask myself, what am I trying to inappropriately identify myself with? What am I afraid of losing? Other questions I need to ask myself when I control too much in my ministry are: do I have friends? Are there people I can reach out to? People in my community that I feel free to share my true self with? Do I have friends with whom I share my male or female experiences and with whom I am open to hearing their stories? Am I only talking to my external friends or some vague inner voice? Or are there real friends in my community with whom I can discuss my joys, fears, failures, successes, hopes, ideas, faith, work, ministry, etc.? I probably am talking more from my own side, from the clerical side, so to say. A priest wrote, "I have never heard of friendship in all my years of theological training. I have memorized many definitions of love, many great theories about God's relationship to humanity, but nothing about friendship as a theological or spiritual term. Theological training and most male theologians remain silent on this point. Why? Probably because they write behind the mask with blinkers in a detached and academic way. I'm not ridiculing their efforts, but isn't the Christian faith empty if we don't experience intimacy of flesh and blood?" The mask of control must be removed if we are to truly celebrate true Christian spirituality. The question we need to ask, how come I find it difficult in some contexts to make friends, to establish friendships, to relate in a friendly way with people? Then the other question we need to ask, am I perhaps too much in control? So let's move further and try to find some good definitions about friendships and whether they are applicable to us. Friendship is one of the most significant interpersonal relationships of our existence, the most constructive for the development of the person. The greatest writers and philosophers of humanity have often spoken of friendship and have seen it as a fundamental theme for understanding people and their lives. Aristotle wrote, "Without friends, no one would choose to live, even if he owned all other possessions." Epicurus wrote, "Of all the goods wisdom provides for happiness, of friendship." And Cicero, in his dialogue on friendship, I don't know if besides wisdom there is anything better for men than friendship. Here are two proverbs that express friendship in complementary perspectives. Seneca says, "To have a friend is to have someone you can die for." And an English proverb teaches, "To live without friends is to die without witnesses." I would like to focus on the mind of Aristotle in this regard. He has more interesting insights to offer on the theme of friendship, because then we can make connections with the friendship within the context of Montfortian spirituality. He talks about three kinds of friendship: friendship of usefulness, friendships of pleasure, friendships of virtue, also called friendships of character. Of course, all the three of them are important, although the third one is non-negotiable if we really want to live up in friendship according to Montfortian, but to say Christian spirituality in the first place, and then Montfortian reinforces that idea. Friendship of usefulness, it is centered around common tasks or projects. An example would be the relationship we have with people we professionally work with. We are both involved in the same task or project, and each of us is useful to the other because we depend on one another's talents and expertise. In this kind of relationship, each person knows what his or her role is and does not expect or look for anything more. Concretely, here, friendship is reckoned useful, but not pivotal for the life of the people involved. We can move in and out of such friendships very easily. Then friendship of pleasure is a relationship we have with people we enjoy being with for recreational, cultural, adventurous reasons, and so forth. There is also something about this kind of friends, such as their personality, that attracts us and makes them likable. But even this friendship is not really pivotal, this kind of friendship, for my spiritual growth. Friendship of character and virtue. It may be the best for us and absolutely essential, but it is also the most demanding. In friendships of character, the center of the relationship is a mutual love for virtue and the mutual desire to grow humanly and spiritually together. I draw the attention especially to words like mutual, common desire, mutual desire to grow humanly and spiritually together. This kind of relationship must be deliberately aimed for and encouraged in spiritual circles. For example, people who enter the spirit of interior practices are linked to each other in friendship by the typical virtues that each practice develops in them. You know, if they really live up to the interior practices, and we know that every interior practices brings to the fore, to the awareness, and not only that, to reality, some particular virtues. And people who share with one another about the progress in such interior practices realize that, in fact, they grow in the same virtues. Let me say more about friendship of virtue for spiritual people. Friendship of virtue helps to overcome selfishness and self-centeredness and to develop self-transcendence. Friendship of virtue teaches how to care for and be genuinely interested in friends for their own sake. I'm really totally there with you. I'm interested in your integral growth, overall growth. In him, 1426 Montfort writes, thank you, Zara, for reminding me of this line. Let whatever affects your friend affect you. That's what friendship is. Let whatever affects your friend affect you. Friendship, which is only in speech, is a ridiculous decoration. Friends in virtue are masters in the art of consolation. That's one thing important. Masters of consolation doesn't mean that they try to wipe away as much as possible, as fast as possible, pain or suffering that one is experiencing. Master, first of all, I offer presence, a present. To be a master in consolation is to be capable, to be good at being present. Friends in virtue are sisters and brothers for life. These are all lines that presences at all times. Discreet but unshakable bulwarks. Beacons that project their signals into the distance. Traveling companions, even when they are not physically at our side. True friends, friends in virtue, do not need to be physically close to each other. They don't need to see each other. They could be miles away, oceans away from each other. And yet they know they are connected. Because this is spirituality. Spirituality moves beyond time and space. Such friendship keeps spiritual people from becoming disenchanted and disillusioned with their vocation, because they are experiencing something unique in their own life. And if they are alone dealing with that uniqueness, they might entertain doubts after some time. Am I stupid? Am I out of this life? Out of my mind? But when they hear other people sharing the same feelings, same sensations, same realizations, then they say, aha, this is beautiful. And only friends can do this. In order to maintain their dreams and aspirations alive, they need other people who share the same dreams and aspirations, who care for what they care, who agree with them about the richness of their chosen way of life, and whose presence reminds them of the value of their commitment. In short, spiritual people need friendships of virtue because they cannot grow good without friends. A virtuous life requires virtuous friends, or at least people who want to become virtuous. Friends make the life of virtue possible by encouraging and supporting one another, by emulating each other's goodness, and by challenging and sometimes even correcting one another. All of this makes friendship a school of virtue. Describing their friendship, or his friendship rather, with Basil the Great, Gregory Nazianzen writes, they met, by the way, they met together in Athens. They were there as students, and they really clicked to one another almost immediately. They found that there was something very common in their own heart. And thus they decided to make friends and to grow together in virtue. When in the course of time, we acknowledged our friendship and recognized that our ambition was a life of true wisdom, we became everything to each other. We shared the same desires, the same goal. The same hope inspired us, the pursuit of learning. This is an ambition especially subject to envy. Yet between us, there was no envy. On the contrary, we made capital out of our rivalry. Our rivalry consisted not in seeking the first place for oneself, but in yielding it to the other. For we all wanted to grow together and to support each other, affirm each other. Our single object and ambition was virtue and the life of hope in the blessings that were to come. With this end in view, we ordered our lives and all our actions. We followed the guidance of God's law and spurred each other on to virtue. If it is not too boastful to say, we found in each other a standard and rule for discerning right from wrong. A great pursuit in our friendship, the great name we wanted for each other, was to be Christians, to be called Christians. With such examples before us, we can say that intimacy with others, especially with spiritual men and women, is not optional. It is both a human and a spiritual imperative. This has been one of the most consoling statements I heard as far as my own life is concerned when I think back of the kind of formation I had in the late 50s, early 60s, where friendship was not recommended. On the contrary, it was wiped. Even the most people's signs were wiped out of our own groups, of our own relationships. And the risk was to grow as very lonely, lonesome, and solitary people, unable to make friends with others. It is a gift we enjoy with very few people, and yet it guarantees throughout our life spiritual growth, healthy, effective maturity, including fruitfulness in our work. What we are to be clear about is that psychologically, for the human being, the more basic need is not for sex per se, but for intimacy, relationship, mutual acceptance, solidarity. I'm coming to the end. Obviously, if we are recommended to make friends among us, especially if we are pursuing the same goals, that friendship is to be founded or grounded on in a basic friendship, which is with Jesus and Mary. I'm talking obviously to Montfortians. In True Devotion 67, Louis de Montfort reports a prayer which only a true friend and lover of Jesus can claim as his or her own. O Jesus Christ, you are my best helper, my beloved friend of overwhelming beauty, my living bread, my eternal priest. You are my guide to my heavenly home, my one true light, my holy joy, my true way, my shining wisdom, my unfeigned simplicity, the peace and harmony of my soul, my perfect safeguard, my bounteous inheritance, my everlasting salvation. O gentle Jesus, let every worthy feeling of mine show you love, take delight in you, and admire you. O God of my heart and my inheritance, Christ Jesus, may my heart mellow before the influence of your Spirit, and may you live in me. May the flame of your love burn in my soul. May it burn incessantly on the altar of my heart. May it glow in my innermost being. May it spread its heat into the hidden recesses of my soul. And on the day of my consummation, may I appear before you consumed in your love. Amen. Montfort recommends friendship of virtue with Mary. We know it throughout his writings. In particular, if we live up to the interior practice with Mary, we emulate her virtues like friends of love do, friends of virtue do. When we heard about the relationship between Basil and Gregory, they were really emulating each other in growing in virtue. Hence, in True Devotion 260, we read, as true servants, friends of Mary, we must look upon Mary as the perfect model of every virtue and perfection fashioned by the Holy Spirit for us to imitate as far as our limited capacity allows. In every action, then, we should consider how Mary performed it or how she would perform it if she were to be in our place. For this reason, Montfort continues, we must examine and meditate on the great virtues she practiced during her life, especially her lively faith, her deep humility, her truly divine purity. And then in True Devotion 110, Montfort gives a complete list of the virtues of Mary. If we make friends with Mary, so we live up to true devotion to Mary, this leads us to imitate her 10 principal virtues. They are deep humility, lively faith, blind obedience, unceasing prayer, constant self-denial, surpassing purity, ardent love, heroic patience, angelic kindness. And the last one, I cannot read it. There is this bar that doesn't allow me to read it.
Heavenly wisdom.
Okay, all right, thank you. So let me come to some conclusions. Yes, this is a graphic that I always like to present, the circles of intimacy or support. There are different circles. The first circle, the center one, is self-intimacy. The second circle is the circle made of soulmates and friends in virtue. Then there is a third circle where you find friendship networks. There could be of utility, of usefulness, pleasure, whatever. Communities, around communities. We can include family networks and support groups. Maybe therapeutic kind of groups or something. Then the last one, the fourth circle, were colleagues, professionals, acquaintances, political allies, and mentors. Now, why did I want to draw this graphic? To make this important point clear that the third and the fourth circles are important, but they are not absolutely necessary. They are important, but not necessary. What is necessary and therefore non-negotiable are the first two. Then the other circles come into the right place. So what do I mean by the first two circles? Self-intimacy, a friendship with self, authentic friendship, obviously, and then friendship with soulmates and with friends in virtue. These are non-negotiable in spiritual life, in spiritual growth. And therefore, even in human relationships that really want to include in their own growth the spiritual dimension. So self-intimacy, relationship with soulmates, friends in virtue. If we do not have these three aspects, then even we put in jeopardy even the other kinds of relationships. Whereas if these two circles are guaranteed, are well affirmed, then we enjoy good relationships with the rest of the, of the circles on the graphic. We need to pay special attention to the connections given in the first two inner circles of the diagram. So non-negotiable intimate connections for my human spiritual development are self-intimacy of feeling comfortable with my inner self and intimate ongoing relationship with my soulmates or friends in virtue. Briefly put, there is no existence more joyful, hopeful, gracious than that in which we come together as friends to love God with all our hearts. If this is the life we find here, we will face the future with joy and confidence. So for personal reflection, how do I describe my experience of friendship and how has it contributed to my moral development? In what specific ways is Marian Montfortian spirituality, but any other kind of spirituality, in what specific ways is spirituality generating friendships of virtue in my own life?